Right. I want to show you this. So I'm online yesterday, and I'm preparing for this year. I go and look up two articles. One, I want to see what ACLU says about the problem of Black Americans, and then I go look up PragerU. Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with both organizations. Mm-hmm. So let's go through the ACLU one. If you can kind of pull that one up first, Rob, that'd be great. Okay, so go all the way to the top of the article so we can kind of read what it says. So here's ACLU, 5 truths about Black history. If we want to understand the state of race in America, we need to know our past, particularly the painful parts. Okay, so to go down now and zoom in on what it says. Go up, go, keep going, keep going, keep going. America was founded on white supremacy. I mean, this is what ACLU says straight up. The first slave arrived here in 1619. Again, going back to the 1619 Project. Between 1619 and 1865, Virginia passed more than 130 slave statutes to regulate the ownership of Black people. In a 1662 law made all children of enslaved mothers slaves regardless of the father's race or status, or that rape by white slave masters could create a free child. A 1667 law codified that slaves who converted to Christianity were still slaves. A 1669 law allowed slaves to be killed for resisting authority, right? Okay, go lower. Let's go to the next one. So this article is ACLU. Next one, terrorism. Even if we refuse to acknowledge it, okay, and it explains terrorism on what's going on. The largest terrorist attack in Oklahoma was not the federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995. It was down the road in Tulsa in 1921. The Green Hood neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma was unique. In the early 20th century, was referred to the Black Wall Street and was home to Black and Native Americans who had become wealthy from old discoveries. And then it goes to saying white residents were disturbed by the growing Black wealth and sought to impose official segregation measures. In 2014, Tulsa passed a law that forbade anyone from living on a block where more than 3/4 of the pre-existing residents were from another race. Okay, so let's go a little bit. If somebody wants to read more, we'll put the link below. Next. So keep going, keep going, keep going. Then we have a war was fought for slavery. By 1860, America had 4 million slaves, worth a total of $3 billion of today's currencies. Okay, let's go to the next one. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. Francis Scott Key was an avowed white supremacist. Keep going to the next one, which is the last one. Reparations for slavery have already been paid, okay? On April 16, 1862, more than 8 months before he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln signed a bill ending slavery in the District of Columbia. It provided for immediate emancipation of slaves and compensation to slave owners loyal to the Union of up to $300 for each freed slave. Over the next 9 months, the Board of Commissioners appointed to administer the act approved petitions completely or in part for former owners of freedom, 2989 former slaves. Lincoln administration paid about $1 million to slave owners in D.C. for the loss of property. If you don't know some of these facts before reading them here, what else don't you know about the hidden truths of Black American history? Okay, so that's ACLU. Now let's go to Prager. Here's what PragerU says. The top 5 issues facing Black Americans. Number 5, victim mentality. Okay. Not holding someone back from more than seeing himself as a victim. Why? Because a victim is not responsible for his situation. Everything is someone else's fault. And a victim sees little chance of improving his life. How can he get ahead if there's someone holding him back? All this makes him victim. All this makes the victim unhappy, frustrated, and angry. And then in the bottom, it says, so victim, so much on victim status, primary center. I call it victimology. Unfortunately, many Black churches preach the victimology. Many Black parents pass it on to their children. Inner city schools teach it to their students. And the Black media reinforces it. Meanwhile, the NAACP and other Black grievance groups fundraise it. Number 4, lack of diversity. Blacks repeatedly demand an honest dialogue on debate about race. But how can there be an honest dialogue about race between blacks and whites when there's virtually no honest dialogue between blacks and blacks? It's hypocritical. And if a black does think whites are ultimately responsible for black people's problems, they're labeled a sellout, an Uncle Tom, a race traitor. I'm sure you've experienced some of that yourself over the years. As long as this type of groupthink exists, race reverence of the Al Sharptons, Jesse Jackson types will continue to be celebrated, while independent Black thinkers such as Professor Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, and yourself will be shunned. Okay, let's go to number 3. Urban terrorism. As just about everyone knows, but few talk about publicly, in major Black cities, violent Black-on-Black crimes is rampant. A Department of Justice study from 1980 to 2008 revealed that Blacks accounted for almost half of the nation's homicide victims, 47.4%, and more than half of offenders, 52.4%, all while only 13% of Americans' population. Okay, so that's another study. We can go to the next one. Number 2, proliferation of baby mamas, the disintegration of the nuclear family, which you talked about briefly earlier. According to Mohan report, he was a senator, I believe, right, Tom? How do you say his last name?
Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Yeah, Moynihan. In 1965, nearly 25% of black children were born to unwed mothers. The report author, Daniel Patrick, said that this was a disaster in the making. He, of course, vilified by so-called black leaders and their progressive allies, but he was right. Today, out of wedlock, birth rates is nearly 75%. 1965, I think you talked about this earlier, 25% to today, 75%. Last but not least is the unquestioning allegiance to so-called progressive policies, okay? Unwavering loyalty to progressive liberal policies is the primary reason why these dire conditions exist. It both makes them possible and perpetuates them. It's no coincidence that progressivism is the common thread that binds predominantly black cities where single-parent homes, failing schools, rampant poverty, and crime predominate. I can keep reading this and talking about what's going on in Detroit, Philadelphia. The point I want to make is 2 very different views of the problem we're facing in America. One is, white supremacist, here's what happened, even this, even that. The other one is responsibility, do something about it, but here's the problem. How do we get these 2 groups to either come together? And if we can't, how do you get the people that are in the middle open-minded to say, trust me, this mindset on this side, it's going to give you a better life than this mindset on this side wanting to be a victim?
Again, I think that the response to Oliver Anthony's song gives you a hint at that. There is a thirst, a deep thirst for virtue. The very fact that a homeless man in Boston a couple of years back found a knapsack with $43,000 in it and turned it in. And there was a GoFundMe, and within 3 days, they raised $93,000 for him. That meant deep in that happened 4 times. A black man in Oakland who was homeless, 53 years old, a woman emptied her change purse and her $15,000 diamond wedding bracelet was there. When she went back 5 hours later, he said, "You're looking for this?" They had a fundraiser for him, $100,000. That says to me that deep in is a desire to support virtue like that. And so what we do is that the way you undermine the moral authority of the ACLU and these other groups is to equip the people suffering the problem to speak for themselves. And they speak for themselves the way the Black Mothers United have come together, for example. You support groups so that now we've got 20 chapters, about 2,000 of these moms who are having positive interactions. We were honoring the police and organizing events with students are being mobilized by the thousands to speak out against violence. In other words, you've got to invest in the institutions within those communities where people are speaking up for themselves and make them the new heroes. But again, it's going to take investment. But conservatives don't invest the way they do. They'll invest in think tanks because their children can go there and be interns. And we seem to think all you got to do is publish the right policies, and then people will change. It's not a rhetorical battle that we're in. This is a battle for meaning. This is a battle of substance. We must demonstrate to the American public that the values of this nation have the consequence of improving the quality of life. And if people can find content and meaning in their life in a drug-infested, crime-ridden neighborhood, and we highlight that and celebrate it and make them the new heroes, then they are the ones that we can stand shoulder to shoulder with and say, we must push back. But again, it takes investment.